Geek Out.
Yeah, I just think that is what Eli Roth thinks people are like.
But
yeah, bro, you know, like you don't want it, and at the end you're just like, oh,
I want it.
Oh.
But yeah, it was
welcome back to the show.
Yeah, welcome back to the show, our Death Wish podcast. No, I was pleasantly surprised with how much I didn't hate the new Death Wish movie, because I was like, oh, okay, Bruce Willis is somewhat charming again, and they, if for a nanosecond, made me believe that Bruce Willis didn't know how to shoot a gun in a movie. But it's fine. It's fine. And yeah, now for some reason I'm watching all the original ones to just dive headfirst into Death Wish insanity.
This is like the end of the Netflix series where you have to pick up a new thread to continue on for the next season. So, like, we're supposed to be rounding out our RoboCop podcast, and you are clearly picking up the thread for Death Wish.
Death Wish with Charles Bronson.
Looking ahead, now that we've lost old Robert Weller, you are looking for another charismatic leading man.
Yeah.
And boy, oh boy, that's a good lead-in to RoboCop 3.
You mixed Robert Burke and Peter Weller as one person.
I sure did. Oh,
what is going on?
Now I'm imagining that weird RoboCop 3 face morphing thing. So, yeah, we have to pull up the cast list before we talk about this film, because RoboCop 3 is this weird contradiction of a film where you could not have casted a better bunch of character actor, all-star actors.
Well, it's because we were talking about this movie is 25 years old.
1993.
And so this is the beginning of like all the character actors we know now who have been in the business for like 25 years, 30 years.
And are constantly in every film.
Everything. This is like their breeding ground. This is like the beginning of their careers.
Like, just to start it off, we have to address that Peter Weller has been replaced, or rather did not want to return.
He was, I mean, there could have been a column A, column B there, but he was filming Naked Lunch.
Oh, which, I mean, go ahead and get that Criterion if you haven't already. Mm-hmm. What is the name of the leading man one more time?
Is it Robert? Oh shit! Hang on, Robert Burke. But I know
I think
Robert
John Burke.
He was credited.
He's got like a 3-name actor.
He has the impossible task of filling in here. Robert John Burke.
John Burke is the new leading man, and right away, the difference in the tone of his voice and the robotic body language is hysterically noticeable.
Well, because it's something that I've been like championing since the beginning of this, and well before ever setting a mic in front of our faces. Talk about RoboCop is like the beautiful like movement of Peter Weller.
And I couldn't. When you said it to me for the first time, I took it for granted because I had no frame of reference for what a good human acting like a robot is. Outside of like Star Wars, C-3PO maybe, or like Data.
But even that is just like you shuffle. He's just shuffling.
Exactly. Yeah, it's all voice acting.
Yeah.
But in this,
it is,
you really need the human actor to nail the robotic movements. And in this, for 2.5 hours, it is this guy shuffling his butt around, and it is so awkward.
Well, there's a scene where he's like shuffling away, and we're like, dude, his armor's falling off,
and he's doing like a dance. Like, you should see me gesticulating on the mic right now.
Yeah.
The hand comes forward and the hip goes back, and the other hand goes forward and the other hip goes back. It's like a dance move. It's so awkward, and it instantly made me miss Peter Weller.
Yeah.
But we don't even get RoboCop for like 20 minutes.
Yeah, he's I mean, aside from obviously the first one where he has to become RoboCop, we still get Alex Murphy, but like this one, like it's a while until he comes in, and then they're like, oh shit, there's RoboCop driving off a fucking bridge, basically. Like, I mean, they go
to wreck a gang of ninja people?
Yeah. So to kind of give you some background on this one, Frank Miller is story by and co-writer on this one again.
Yeah,
with the
2
script.
credits on the same credit screen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Frank Miller. Well, because by this time he's like Frank Miller, you know what I mean? Like, granted, he's been, with RoboCop, he's been doing stuff too.
Yeah, that's a good one. By 1993, how many iconic comic books has Frank Miller put
Well,
out?
let's say he's already pretty much done his run on Daredevil.
That's enough for me.
I don't think Man Without Fear was done yet. I could be wrong, but like Born Again, arguably the greatest thing he's ever written.
Season 3 of Daredevil.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. But like, Dark Knight Returns has already come out, obviously. And like I said, he's already reinvented a character with Daredevil and Batman. He's already reinvented two characters. Now, granted, he had done that with Daredevil by the time RoboCop 2 would come out, which is one of the reasons, and with really freaking Dark Knight Returns. So, but I mean, by this point, it's established. Like, Frank Miller is like everyone knows who Frank Miller is in terms of like. I feel like if you're a fan of RoboCop, you know who Frank Miller is. Like, you're like, oh shit, the guy that did that with Batman, the guy that did that with Daredevil.
He's kind of like he makes your franchise better at this point.
And like I love Frank Miller even for some of them, like The Dark Knight Strikes Again being like this insane fucking sequel. I love that book.
As insane as his work is, I still am a fan of Frank Miller.
Dude, he's one of my all-time favorites, if not my all-time favorite.
If you're gonna make a violent 80s thing, hopefully Frank is involved.
Hopefully Frank's involved. Now, there are elements from they made a book of RoboCop: The Last Stand, which has elements of his RoboCop 3 script. They basically made his original script into a comic book. Now, granted, that original script is not what we see in RoboCop 3.
Right.
A main reason of that is because it's a PG-13 film. RoboCop is literally a toy in this, a walking toy advertisement.
I want to ask you a question to start this off.
Okay.
What did we see in RoboCop 3?
So,
what I've been like the whole 2.5 hours we watched this film, I was like, how are we going to summarize this? It is a mess.
I mean, we get the we get the overflow of the rebellion is in full force in this one.
Like okay, right. So like, I guess for the listeners and for the new audience, it's the first PG-13 film. So like we said while we were watching it, it basically for the first 30 minutes reiterates everything that we've seen for the first two films.
Yeah, because we kind of realized for a lot of kids, this is probably their first RoboCop
and 93's like that like movie animated series toy trifecta.
It's all there. Yeah. Because they were realizing that their market is kids, which is insane when you think back to like what
we just saw.
RoboCop 3, but especially what RoboCop was. What RoboCop was intended as
like
originally.
A straight up Paul Verhoeven violence pornography
just
film.
The best ultra violent nightmare.
And
ever.
then Irvin Kershner kind of film.
Well, okay, now I can ask you this, Mike.
All right.
How do you look at RoboCop 2 compared now that you've seen RoboCop 3?
I missed RoboCop 2 the entire time we watched this film.
Well, because I honestly realized how little I remember RoboCop 3 watching this. Mm-hmm. This is maybe the second time I've ever seen RoboCop 3 all the way through.
I mean,
I've watched bits and pieces.
You and
before.
our producer Chris basically saw me have total recall like I was a 4-year-old.
Well, there's one moment
I remember that.
Yeah. There's a moment you're like, oh shit, he's gonna do this, and I was like, actually, yeah, he's gonna do everything you just said. But so there are plenty of elements I don't remember. But like the thing with RoboCop 2 is at least there's some great shit in RoboCop 2.
Yeah, there's you use the phrase a lot, the one perfect shot in any film or like the one perfect moment. I was looking for that. But with RoboCop 2, there were so many great examples. Like the Kane confrontation where they cut him up. It's goofy, but I remember it very easily. Mm-hmm. The final boss fight, as lame as it is, I know that RoboCop fought RoboCop 2.
Yeah. And he does rip out like a spinal cord and smash a brain on the ground, you know?
And then like, as silly as it was, the trial of trying to make RoboCop 2, where they were basically, by the way, Rob Flanagan, a loyal listener of this show, hi Rob, pointed out that all those people that they were trying to make into RoboCop 2 were also like living human beings that were being tortured and going through these awful experiments.
Oh my God.
You know? And like that film introduced elements that I actually found interesting. Like, oh wow, they're trying to like workshop him. They're trying to do like a focus group on RoboCop. Isn't that interesting? There's a commentary there. In this film, there was no commentary at all. It was like you say, it was a version of RoboCop for the kids where you basically re-explain the lore of RoboCop in a sellable, monetized way.
You have
action figures.
You have him in the chair. You have him remember his family. His best friend in the chair. You have him remember his family. You have OCP or Dix. The cops don't know what they're doing.
Boy,
they're overwhelmed, you know. I wanted to mention, you mentioned Rob, loyal listener to the show. Hi, Rob. We got a nice little note from a friend of ours. I think you might know him, but Bill, he's a guy who I know back from the comic
Sure.
book days.
Comic Book Bill.
Yeah. He wrote a nice little thing saying that we're doing the Lord's work, wading through the RoboCop franchise. So I appreciate kind words like that.
We are doing capitalist Jesus' work.
Yes, Lord Murphy's work.
Lord
so
Murphy.
I appreciate that. That was a nice little thing to say.
And you just hinted at it. So the film, like Omnicorp, they really lay it on thick just in case you didn't understand that Omnicorp were the bad guys. They reiterate that Delta City was a failure, but we are still trying to
get there.
We're trying to gentrify the city of Detroit. We are going to do this. And who better to do it than Freddy Got Fingers, Ripped Torn? I mean, like I said before, it is a character actor all-star throwdown jam. I have to go down the list of people that you might recognize. The blind guy and the bad dad from Get Out are in this film. So you have 2 cast members from Get Out, which also account for 2 cast members of the film Dodgeball, because there's Rip Torn is the guy in the wheelchair.
That's right.
And who's the second one? The guy that played Satan in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou is in this. Crossing Jordan, who had her own reoccurring series for many years, is in this film.
Yeah.
And the little kid, I kept trying to place where she went off to. I felt like she might have been like Newt in Aliens or something. Well, to be fair to this man's career, the guy that plays RoboCop is a very successful character actor on television. He, for most listeners, you will know him as the IAB agent on Law and Order who is constantly trying to hem up Benson and Stabler for shooting a suspect. That's the guy.
I also know him, Mr. RoboCop, from the show Rescue Me. He plays...
Could we just call him Mr. RoboCop?
Mr. RoboCop, sure, yeah. Look, he's taller than Peter Weller, and he's wearing a suit made for Peter Weller. So it's like wearing a pair of shoes
I
that are too...
didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's sad.
It is sad. He's wearing a pair... You ever wore a pair of shoes that are like too small? Just like a little bit, and you're like, I can wear these the rest of the day, and your feet are like, fuck you.
It is an actual
That's
torture
your
device?
entire body.
Okay, now I feel terrible.
Because we're going to reference, like we said... RoboCop: The Definitive History, beautiful hardcover by Callum Waddell.
This might be the greatest visual joke in our podcast.
And so, also, that guy looks like armored older Tom Cruise in this book. I know no one's going to know what we're talking about. Pick up the book and you can look for it.
Follow along, listeners.
Anyway, I wanted to mention here, talking about people in the movie, Nancy Allen is back as Lewis. And she is, we're going to assume you've watched the film as you're doing this.
Yeah, spoilers.
Yes, she's killed off in this film.
Boy, oh boy, is she killed off.
She didn't have, which is something I didn't know, thanks to the book, when we did RoboCop 2, that she did not have a pleasant experience during RoboCop 2. Remember, she's like barely in it.
Yeah, and Irvin Kershner didn't get along with her, so they kind of phased her out.
So here's a quote from her from the book. "I only wish they had killed me sooner in that movie."
Oh my God,
and she's killed early in the movie.
Yeah,
like Act 1.
You guys were like kind of teasing me. I was like, "Oh, Lewis is back, not for long."
Yeah, she said that she didn't plan to go back for the third one, but felt responsibility.
You could tell in her
fans.
performance too.
Yeah.
She does not try. End of sentence. That. Like she is introduced. By the way, the scene she is introduced in, I forgot to mention one more character actor, comedian and Curb Your Enthusiasm's own Jeff Garlin.
Oh, yeah.
Is the cashier at the donut shop.
That's right.
What's it like to be a rocket scientist? Great line delivery. Fantastic.
Oh, if I ever met him,
delivery.
That's the line I would drop.
That's the line.
And you know what? I bet he'd be like, RoboCop 3,
man. You know, that was my first. Oh, my God, that was my first film. I'm like doing my Jeff Garlin impression now.
Well, there's a moment where he has a non-speaking part later on where they're showing, we're being overrun by OCP.
That's right.
And he's in the background, and Mike and I just went bum bum bum. But yeah, so yeah, the movie's like littered with character actors,
just all up and down it. Like Bradley Whitford, the guy from The West Wing that like people on the left recognize, the guy that plays like the bad guy in Get Out that a whole brand new generation of people recognize.
That's right.
I think for like the first 20 years of his career, he got paid to condescendingly refer to women as dollface.
He says doll. Yeah,
he says dollface way more than just.
He
in
must
this
be
film.
paid extra to drop dollface because it is. And again, spoiler alert, he's not in the movie very long.
Not at all. He, by the way, commits suicide off screen.
And he has the gun in his jacket pocket ready for that day. and he's fired. And he's like, here we go.
I got to break this scene down. I thought about this, right?
Okay.
If I'm Bradley Whitford,
Yeah.
why would I kill myself if I had the gun in the office in front of the guy who just shit on me in front of a lower
You know why, Mike?
executive?
You know why, Mike? Because a scene before we see a guy jump out a window to his death.
Which is also a ripoff of a film that came out in the same year called Time Cop, starring Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Fuck.
Like,
all we needed was Robo to do the splits.
yeah. And actor activist Ron Silver to be the bad guy of the film. But
so let me blow your mind here real quick, Mike, because
Do
like
it.
RoboCop 3, we're gonna jump all over the place
Let's
with
do it.
plots and be all kinds of messy and whatever. So the budget for this is $22 million.
oh my
No,
god!
no, wait. I'm gonna go back for because this is the end of the trilogy, guys. This is the end of this era of RoboCop in terms of live action, because
All
we're
right.
gonna be talking
so
about.
for the listeners,
So-
if you watched this film along with us, do you think they spent $22 million on screen?
$22 million, and the box office was $10.6 million. Okay, so
They
let's
lost
do
$12 million.
let's do RoboCop 2 now. 3 years prior, okay, $35 million. Box office $45.7 million.
So they were still making money on
still
the
making
sequel.
money. $35 million. This is gonna blow your fucking mind. How much the first RoboCop cost? $13 million.
What?
Yeah, and it made gross $53.4 million.
Holy
US, yeah.
shit.
Yeah.
Okay, so you kind of, all right, knowing what we know now, you can't blame Hollywood for getting so money hungry, because with a profit margin of like $40 million, you can't help but say, okay, well, the sequel is definitely
And
happening.
it's an ultra-violent R-rated movie.
Like a statement film. I would not hesitate to call RoboCop 1 a violence statement.
It opened number. This is the first RoboCop.
Yeah.
Just as an overview, it opened number 1 and grossed over $8 million in its opening weekend, another $6 million in its second weekend, and regaining the top spot. So, yeah.
And RoboCop 3 probably lost out to, I'm going to say, Mac and Me.
Hang on.
But so while you're doing that, like looking at the past films, RoboCop 3 completely fails the legacy of the franchise on a creative level, because RoboCop 1 subverts all these expectations of an action hero and violence in American films and police and all this stuff. 2, I know I ragged on it for like talking out all of the points that 1 hinted at, and 3 takes all of the points that they talk down and turn it into the Kids Bop version and just dilute it and talk about it for 45 minutes way too long.
Yeah.
To the point where we're like, I get it. Please stop explaining it. And it's just so many talented actors disappointing me for 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
Was there a satisfying moment in this film for you? That's
No,
the
no.
longest pause I've ever seen you take.
No is the quickest response, but like as a kid, because I remember when I saw this, actually it wasn't even a kid. I think the first time I saw this was like in college. But like, I for the longest time, I mixed the beginning of RoboCop 2 and RoboCop 3 and mashed it together in my mind. So I remembered it as RoboCop 2 intro. They hit him with the fucking missile. The car flips over, and then he shoots out the top and pops out. And he's like, but really, no. I mean, like, okay, okay. I feel like there are moments in like I can be a really easy pushover in certain things, and even in really bad movies.
Right.
So like the idea of the little girl in the movie having a RoboCop doll and seeing the cop car pull up behind her and be like, maybe it's RoboCop. Like she loves RoboCop, right? Like tiny little like that's as far, I'm like, oh yeah, that could be an interesting thing. Kind of, I don't know. I'm reaching for straws, but like the idea of the legend of RoboCop, he's this thing, but no, I'm just really stalling because I don't want to have dead air, because I can't think of like a super satisfying moment, like him throwing on the rocket pack. Did it look cool when it came out in '93? Because it doesn't look cool now. You know what I mean? Like him flying over.
It was so preposterous. It would have felt appropriate if he just flew away out
that's what
of
we're
Delta
joking.
City.
Just keep going, dude.
Just fly
keep
over the
going.
confrontation and leave.
Is the new RoboCop, because we mentioned this last podcast, they're working on a new RoboCop, a sequel to the first one. 2 and 3 will no longer exist. As of right now, these are still technically canon. Is RoboCop 2 like? Do you do like Delta City in the new RoboCop? Also, you know, I remember we talked about this. Your dream director was the guy, the Crank.
Yeah, Neville Dean and Taylor.
My dream director now is because I rewatched this movie on a plane recently. Because I saw it in theaters, I was like, yeah, that's not bad. For some reason, watching it on a plane on my iPod, my iPad, I was like, fuck yeah, it was Hardcore Henry. I want the dude who made Hardcore Henry to make the new RoboCop. I'm not saying first person RoboCop. If you want to have one scene, it's HUD, his HUD screen. It'd be great for that. Like, you don't have to have an action scene set to it.
I would really like that.
I would like to see him clear out a room in first person because again, we get the HUD a lot. But he has the ultra violence, the humor, and the insanity. I fucking adore Hardcore Henry. Like, I wish that movie got a sequel. Sharlto Copley is a fucking genius in that movie. Like,
stuntmen,
out of control.
And that's okay. If I had one redeemable thing about this film, it is the stuntmen that put themselves at risk time and time again to try to make this film interesting.
Okay, I'm gonna open up
Men
this book
lit
here.
themselves on fire for RoboCop 3.
Yeah,
for
RoboCop
like a
3.
sustained amount of time.
There were some stunts in RoboCop 3. Well, in the entire trilogy, but like RoboCop 3, we'll give it
simple little stunts that looked way too dangerous.
We're gonna throw some positives to
men
RoboCop 3.
in like plastic suits falling on their hip bones. There's no way that was.
There
good.
is a beautiful double-page spread in the RoboCop Definitive History book here that shows a guy in a RoboCop suit on fire,
completely on fire in real life,
completely on fire, walking through, obviously the movie glass or whatever, and his face is clearly exposed.
Yeah, that's a real face.
I mean, like, it's nuts. There's another stunt where he gets thrown into a door that doesn't break. Like, you would have thought the door breaking would have given him some kind of, like, and then you fall on a pad. You see this dude in a RoboCop suit get thrown into a door that doesn't break and then land on his ass and, like, basically just crumble.
Because that's how you know it hurt really bad. When it doesn't move or make a sound, anyone that's ever really been hurt knows.
You just sit there.
That's where you just kind of lay there like you're dead and the pain just courses through your body. So as you're looking through the book, it's weird that I kind of called the plot of RoboCop 3 when we did the RoboCop 2 episode without knowing it.
Yes.
Where I was like, wouldn't it be cool if the little kid lived and RoboCop worked with the little kid? Mm-hmm. He totally does work with the little kid who is a hacker in the film.
You also kind of called, I feel like during the first RoboCop, because I remember going, wait till 3, Mike, like, the police completely takes over, and then there's like the rebellion. Like, you basically called RoboCop 3. No, but speaking of injuries, I want to give another like shout out to the insanity of what Robert Burke had to deal with. Dealing with the suit made too small for him, not even made for him. Listen to this. My L5 and L6 vertebrae certainly have memories of that scene. He's referring to the rocket pack scene. They brought a doctor in, and he said, you have compression and a buildup of spinal fluid. He suggested I rest for 3 weeks, and I had to say, not in this business. We shot the jetpack scenes after principal photography using green screen in Los Angeles.
And that green screen, you guys, is so bad that he looks like he has a Christian halo around him. And the only thing that he does to demonstrate that he might be flying is does like a full spin around on what is clearly the table they are filming him on. And it is humiliating.
Yeah.
But I can see
it looks good as a toy. I'll tell you that. I don't know if it was Sideshow or somebody has like the RoboCop 3 with the rocket pack and like the literal arm cannon. And even now at 31, I'm like, that looks fucking badass.
And that's the greatest irony to me that while
I do like the arm cannon, I have to admit,
it's very obviously a cash grab. Those toys are dope though.
Yeah.
Like,
oh, dude,
it's so weird how they even use the RoboCop that we all knew as a kid in the film. It's like the opening shot of the little girl with her toy RoboCop. Yeah. Oh, there's Robo.
Yeah.
If you were of that generation, every one of us wanted that goddamn toy.
Oh my god, I need to bring in when we have like more of the free flowing like comic book, TV show, everything else podcast about this. Some of my RoboCop figures. I have an absurd amount. When the reboot came out, I went to Toys R Us and I bought like a bunch of RoboCop figures for the new one. So I was like, oh fuck yeah, I have money now. I'm not a 5-year-old. I can go out and buy it. I bought a bunch, right? And as I go to check out, the guy's like, is this for your kid? I should have just lied and said yes, but I was like, nah, they're for me. And he was like, really? I was like, yeah. Just bag them, please.
You know what? This is a judgment-free zone, sir.
Oh, yeah. I'm trying to find the RoboCop 3 statue here as we talk. Also, Ed 209 is in this kind of.
As
loyal as a puppy.
Punchline.
Yeah. Remember when he was a vicious son of a bitch?
And this is the scene where I was probably most critical of the film in general, where in a hacking
10 minutes
scene,
in.
the little girl programs Ed 209 to be. She says, "I'm going to make him loyal as a puppy," and then on the hacker screen it says "loyal as a puppy," and then it initiates the loyal as a puppy program, I guess. And Ed 209 goes out loud, "I am loyal as a puppy." Now, I just have to ask, as a guy that's edited and written things for people before, how would a robot know, grammatically speaking, what loyal as a puppy even means? Like, you would just have to say, like, protect these people. I know I'm being too literal, and I know it's just a movie, Mike, and if you're thinking about these details, you should maybe relax a little bit.
Well, again, we are doing a podcast in depth about all these movies.
It is just, after 2 films, like, can you imagine being, like, a loyal hardcore fan in 1993? You're sitting there waiting for the 3rd film, and that is what you get in the first 10 minutes. Like, I could see being a bad fanboy in that situation, but...
Yeah,
I just had to take it.
Well, again, like there's so many whiffs in this movie, you know. Like we talk about whiffs, in RoboCop 2.
Right.
This is like watered down
I
to the
missed
extreme.
that wife scene.
Also, look, here's the sideshow RoboCop 3. I mean, it's literally built to be an awesome sideshow.
It's too nice.
Yeah.
It's too nice. It doesn't deserve this.
Yeah, and one day I'll probably own it. Because I want to have I'm the idiot that would buy, because I recently bought a sideshow RoboCop figure that is like RoboCop 1, it has like battle damage add-on shit, and I want to have a RoboCop. They also have one where like it's you get 2 figures, and it's like police officer Murphy, and then like RoboCop without the helmet, and I'm like, God. Shit, I need that.
Like post-murder Murphy.
Also, is it ever a good idea in a bad sequel to recall scenes from a better movie? Is that ever a good idea?
That was so tough.
Twice. At least twice.
It just reminds you of what you could be experiencing.
Okay, for me, the worst example of that I've ever seen in a movie, that I think super unfair to the actor, is in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. The opening theme, like during like the opening credits when they're playing, you know, like the Bond opening, after he turns and looks to the audience, George Lazenby, and goes, "This never happened to the other fellow," or whatever, and then it plays the title sequence. They show scenes from all the Connery movies. And I'm like, dude, all you're doing is making this dude's life a living hell.
Just reminding us of what we could have.
There is a scene, though, that I do like in Our Majesty's Secret Service, where he opens his desk. Now, this scene I thought was clever because it's more continuity-based. He opens his desk and takes out pieces from the other Bond movies, like gadgets, and it plays like a little cue. That thing, I'm like, okay, well, that's connecting us with this is still James Bond. But showing literal scenes from Russia with Love before the movie starts is like, that's just a kick in the balls to George Lazenby, dude.
You're handicapping it, and not in a good way.
Now, granted, to be fair, some people might not have had any idea that those were shots from the first RoboCop. You know what I mean? Like some people would be like, who knows? But I never think that's a good idea.
And
well, especially for this movie.
And like you said, while we were watching it, there's a really good chance that this could be a whole new generation's very first RoboCop, and that we have to refresh this audience, and kids have short attention spans, so you're constantly reiterating, remember, this is his wife. Lewis reminds him of his wife. Dr. Lazarus reminds him of his wife. You had this like 3 times going back to like remember the old films. And I can't justify any of this film. I can't.
Well, I mean, the only thing I can think of is like, if I saw this as a young kid, I'd probably love the shit out of it.
Yeah, and
you know what I mean?
It is the reason they call back those old scenes is to remind. It's exclusively for the children in the audience.
Yeah, and it is again that wish fulfillment thing where like, imagine if I got to hang out with RoboCop. and fight a corrupt police force.
And so, yeah, it's funny that you mentioned a part of the plot because for the minutes we've been doing this show, we have not talked about the plot at all.
Well, there's like it's
because it's
nothing there.
awful. Like we actually had to check on Rotten Tomatoes, 4%.
Yeah.
4% on Rotten Tomatoes. That is Gods of Egypt level. That is Paul Blart 2 level bad.
I think it's Death Wish 3 level.
Yeah,
too.
it's. I mean, we
because
joked
this is
about,
a Death Wish podcast.
we joked about RoboCop 2 being diminishing returns, and this is.
I mean, it is, but like this is like diminishing returns of diminishing returns.
Multiplied. This is like what happens when you cube something. Like this is really bad, and
God.
it's so bad that you have odd Asian racist stuff in it for no reason.
What
like,
a wasted villain.
What
too.
a wasted bad guy. Like he only exists to 1, be called up with Asian flutes, 2, cut down a gas station sign with a sword because he's also Asian.
Yeah.
And then 3, flip around with a second version of himself, and then he is just gone.
Yeah. Also,
that's the plot.
Chris pointed out there's 3 of them because it's RoboCop 3.
Jesus Christ. 3 Robos versus RoboCop 3.
And you called it too, where it's like going to go to the HUD, and it was in like Japanese.
The RoboCop from Japan had Japanese HUD, even though RoboCops only speak or robots at all only speak in machine language, which is binary.
Is the most memorable part of this movie where he takes the car that's like the old like pink Cadillac fuzzy dice, and he's like the
You mean where he encounters one guy of color who for some reason is a pimp.
But you also were like, damn, that's a fucking bad outfit.
His outfit was absolutely amazing. That suit with the chain that where the tie should be.
Yeah.
It was amazing. But that pink Cadillac with the red lights, and they shoot it up and it still runs.
And then he like stops at a street hockey game. He just stares.
It is such a 90s film that this caricature's car is
But it's
thwarted.
almost not an 90s film. It's still stuck in the 80s.
It's one of those early 90s bad films that is so bad you literally think you're watching something from like the late 80s.
You could easily lie and tell some of this movie was made in 1989, and they'd be like, of course.
And when you find out it's from 93, it's like a Sixth Sense reveal. Like, what? We were in the present the whole time?
Oh, shit.
And I just feel like a disappointed parent. I have watched a career have so much potential in the first one. You saw signs of trouble in the second one.
Yeah.
And then this one, RoboCop 3 felt like the cousin with potential showing up plastered at Thanksgiving. And you're like, man, you're really going through a tough time right now.
But can you think of a trilogy ever that totally falls apart as much as RoboCop?
No, I was doing this while we were watching the film. Aliens holds up better, as much shit as Aliens 3 caught with all the edits that came out.
Oh, yeah, but at least the sequel's fucking great.
Right, and look at the people who made those films, you know what I mean? Cameron...
and in Terminator, you know?
Terminator also. Even in Terminator 3 with fat Chris Hardwick, it's still an all right movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like... I mean, it's, you know... But again... If we're going to just 3 movies, you know, Alien, Aliens, Alien 3,
right,
doesn't come close to the RoboCop level.
Nothing.
Terminator T2 and Terminator 3 doesn't
even
come
Jurassic
close.
Park.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I don't feel like there's ever needed to be a sequel for any Jurassic Park movie ever. But not.
The drop off still isn't as bad, even with, and I know way too much about that movie, even with the Sam Neill speech about like every boy either wants to be an astronomer or an astronaut. Go fuck yourself. That was terrible, and even that was much better than what felt like a Saturday morning cartoon of RoboCop. Because again, everything from this film is supposed to be kind of seen through the eyes of the little girl who looks at him as like this amazing legend, and yet he kind of just fumbles through the entire film.
What if this movie actually did that? Like, what if this movie, like, it doesn't try to like be big corporate, you know, it has all that in the background, but this movie, like, the main character is the little girl, and you follow her, like, and like get away from like having like her house being destroyed. Like she's like Newt style, or she's like the feral kid in Road Warrior, right? Where she's been living on and the one thing she has is a RoboCop toy, like fucked up RoboCop toy, and it just follows her through this movie. And RoboCop comes along, and like that would be something.
You just described a great film. Like that sounds fantastic. I am so mad we didn't get that.
I'll get the Hardcore Henry guys, and we'll, but like, you sparked that idea where it's like, what if it actually did that? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
and it still could have. Like, I mean, I don't love a PG-13 RoboCop, but like, it still could have had that. You know what I mean? Like, you still could have had a PG-13 if they were so pressed on that. You still could have had him with the arm and stuff. But like, what if he was just like not a background character, but like the secondary character, and like it takes its time, and when he does show up, it's like, holy shit, it's RoboCop, like the big reveal of RoboCop, and like him being more the protector, and him be, he always likes to imprint any kid he sees is his child,
that's so like I was thinking with any trilogy, with the third film, the trouble is the intention is always to give you something new, something you haven't seen before.
Yeah.
And I feel like this film's decision was to make the Nazi visuals with Omnicorp a little more palatable.
Yeah.
Give the whole idea of fascism being wrapped up for kids as like shocking, like that whole Johnny Rehab thing.
Oh, yeah.
It was awful, and like it cuts to an animated segment for way too long, and it kind of shows you like, well, what if they really were programming your kids to accept fascism on TV? And they fail so hard at expressing like that was their intention that by the time the Johnny Rehab thing is over, I think that was the first time I actually said out loud while we were watching this, I am so bored. Like, I'm trying to find something to continue to latch onto about the plot of this film so we can talk about it on the podcast.
Well, it's like, here's something too, like, speaking of like Terminator and everything like that, if you're like, Mike, you're in charge of this movie, right? Could you see a way where you kill off RoboCop in the end?
If you are comparing the RoboCop franchise to the other great contemporaries of its generation, that is the obvious move, because Ripley dies at the end of Alien 3.
Yeah.
Terminator offs himself at the end of T2, and it's like this iconic moment.
Oh, it's so good.
And you bring him back for T3. RoboCop, for all intents and purposes, should have gone out like that. Like,
especially
the little girl crying and admiring
yeah.
him, and the doctor looking on, this brave creation of ours, and then he dies for the greater good. This is an amazing third installment of RoboCop.
Yeah.
That we did not get.
Especially if you do play the whole thing where like it's like a lone wolf and cub, but it's like RoboCop and this little girl.
Yep.
Like, and Detroit's like let's just flesh this movie out that we're making.
Mm-hmm.
So like Detroit is fucked. Like, it's not even like buildings. It's like if you're outside, it's like almost like Judge Dredd, but it's like if you're outside of OCP Delta City and you're not in one of like their, what do they call them? Like containment, whatever, prisons, but like they don't call it that.
A mega city.
Yeah. But like, and this little girl's out there and RoboCop is like, the guard or whatever. And like, no one knows he even exists anymore because how could his power source still exist?
Right.
Whatever, blah, blah, blah. And RoboCop shows up and RoboCop, like, I don't know, blows up OCP with his computer chip or mainframe thing or whatever, and like goes out and saves the day. I'm just spitballing. But like,
I'm like visualizing this because like everything that we got is so bad that like I want what you're talking about just to replace it. And it's weird when you told me that they were doing a RoboCop 2 that destroys 2 and 3 and just retcons the timeline. I was like, well, why would you do that? And now that we've gotten to 3, that is the obvious choice.
Also, like, you're talking about like when the third one being the one where it's like, all right, let's take chances here. What is RoboCop like done? They give him accessories, but like he's no different than he is in the. You know what I mean? Like he's just this, because by the end of the first movie, he's like, no, I'm Murphy.
And the second one,
in control. The second one's like, okay, we're gonna fuck with that, and the third one, he's just like.
Don't forget
where is he most of the movies? There's that one scene where he just like looks like he's doing yoga in the fucking resistance base.
He really does spend about 10 minutes of the film crawling around on the floor. it's so strange to see him like baby's first RoboCop on his stomach with his butt up.
Yeah.
And like also it is really important to point out the actor that plays RoboCop plays when he has his helmet off, he never speaks louder than this. And it is so jarring.
But you're also forgetting that there are long unintentional pauses.
It's so awkward. I mean, even
look at how quiet the wavelength is when we did the.
We are stressed. Like, I bet you the listeners of this pod, did the audio drop out? But like, Peter Weller really, when you're watching the first two, you don't realize how much work he's really doing to make this character interesting until you're faced with three. And what's really, again, I'm going to say it, I've watched enough Law & Order to know this guy is good at what he does. He's a character actor that George Clooney uses as like the mean guy.
Yeah.
And yet, for this, it was so clear that he was like living in the shadow of an actor that he just.
Well, like we said, like it is an impossible task they gave him.
Yeah,
you know
and he's
what I
like
mean?
In pain physically the entire time.
Oh my god! But like, I mean, I think if the movie was good, of course that would have helped. But like,
we would have a lot more to talk about.
Yeah. Well, it's not even there's like because at least in 2 I was like, oh, there's some great action, like the open his return in RoboCop 2 is classic. Like the shootout with the baby and like the ricochet,
very Lethal Weapon
style.
style.
The motorcycle chase is ridiculous, but at least on a motorcycle. The end, there's the no look, the 3 or 4 no look shootout scene, like. There's none of that in this one.
And this one was so bad that it was pointed out to us that when he cuts himself out of the car and stands up and starts shooting people, that's just a guy in half a RoboCop suit.
Yeah.
There's no way he's got the legs on, and it's probably got something to do with the budget.
And I remember trying to think, like, maybe, because I remember, like, okay, he drives off the thing, like, lands, like, 40 feet in the air, smash, maybe they blow up the door or something. I was like, maybe there's no reason why he couldn't have just opened the door.
Open the door and get out of the car, just like every other film he's been in.
Dude, they blow up his car, and it flips in 2, and it's on fire, and he gets out.
Yep. And then he's...
Yeah,
that's right. He still does open the door up after blowing the roof off. He does eventually get out of the car.
He does eventually. But
it would just, and it's one of those things where the director was like, but it would be cooler, if it happened like this. And by the way, so now that the director has come up, Fred Decker is on record.
Co-writer.
He has said, if you want to blame somebody for this film, blame me.
And that is admirable because, like, he easily could have been like, oh, the studio did this. My hands are tied.
Creative differences.
Yeah, he's talked about, like, no, like, I dropped the ball. And I do empathize with the guy, like, because I was telling Mike before we recorded, I was like, I love RoboCop as a character almost more than anything else out there. But, like, if I made a movie that sucked, that would kill me,
And the ways in which it found ways to suck. For example, in this book, they talk about how the director was like, I thought it would have been better to bring back Lewis as Lady RoboCop at the end of the film. We actually joked about that happening because when there was the final confrontation between him and the Japanese Robo, it was like, well, this is dumb. And we were jokingly like, well, what if it was Lewis and he had to like face her? And in the book, the director was like, honestly, what I wanted to do was make Lewis Lady RoboCop.
Lady RoboCop.
And to me, it's like, dude, that was like a joke I made. That would have been way funnier. But it would have still somehow fit the tone of the franchise better.
Yeah.
But it's still, to me, the misunderstanding of why that would have also been unintentionally funny is just a reflection of the troubled state of the production.
Yeah. And
it is also worth mentioning in this book that you bought for research. How many pages? Like, that's like a 300-page book.
It's a pretty hefty book.
I'm going to say 17 of those 300 dedicated to RoboCop 3.
It's like 222 pages, and like chapter 1 and 2 is obviously the original, and RoboCop 2. Pretty thick chapters.
Volumes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to read this from the book here. This is kind of sad, but we're talking about, again, Fred Decker here. Here's a quote from him. It might be overstating things that the critical failure of RoboCop 3 killed my career as a director, but I haven't made a movie since, so you do the math. Sighs the filmmaker. To this day, I have dreams about doing a 4th movie, if only to get it right. It's my subconscious fucking with me, but the baton had been passed. I never saw any of the TV versions or cartoons, and I never gave it another thought. That's fucking tragic.
That, ladies and gentlemen, that is the saddest part of this podcast.
Jesus.
Like, that is a bummer, because that is an official publication printed by the studio responsible for making this franchise in order to promote the new reboot. And the quote they got from RoboCop 3's director is pure regret. Pure, unadulterated, unfiltered regret.
Oh, man. That's such
like,
a bummer.
Looking back on it, yeah, I really messed this up, and I'd like another chance, if only to do one well. Oh, man, that hurts my soul.
Like I said, like, I can't help but empathize with this dude, because like, I just keep thinking, like, fuck. Well, that's a bummer, man. And that should be the tagline for RoboCop 3. That's a bummer, man. Here's the poster right here, and instead of saying he's back online, back in duty, it just says that's a bummer, man.
That's a bummer, man.
Oh, man. Well, we're coming up on the end of this one, Mike. And so yeah, that is it for like the OG trilogy,
the original trilogy.
You've now seen them all. For the trilogy. The plan is for the next episode, we're gonna just to keep it all kind of together with the movies, jump into the reboot, because the TV series, the cartoons, the comics, they're all over the place in terms of when they've been released.
Sure.
And blah, blah, blah. And we could spend more time, joking around with that. But the next episode, next month is going to be all about the RoboCop reboot with Joel Kinnaman.
Excellent.
Which I have a lot to say about that. So I'm interested, because I feel like us sitting down and like watching the movie right before the podcast. There's some interesting things that happen watching it. You know what I mean? Like as if we were just watching it on our own, or doing our own thing. So I am excited to talk about the reboot, because I think there's some really bold shit in that movie.
Okay.
And I think there's some big missteps in that movie for obvious reasons. But I think there is some good shit in that movie, and I am excited to dig and find it.
I look forward to it because I've said it for 3 episodes now. I think that Joel Kinnaman, they as in Hollywood or the industry, they're convinced that he's a leading man, that he's got leading man qualities, and this RoboCop is sort of like the thesis for that idea.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And I'm just glad to be done with the original series because, like, I'm honestly, the way that I looked at this was a lot like the career of Roy Jones Jr., the boxer, where like the first movie was like when he had those belts, it was like, damn, I've never seen anybody fight like this. It's completely unorthodox. It totally subverts the idea of boxing in and of itself. The second film, it was like, oh man, he's starting to show signs of ring rust. And then the third one was him getting knocked out by a 38-year-old who hadn't fought in 6 years in Vegas. And it was like, please end your career, man. This is hard. Yeah. This is hard to watch.
Well, it'll be interesting to see because, like I said, you're coming off RoboCop 3, going into the reboot. That might be the best possible scenario.
Honestly, I am really thinking that after this, Samuel L. Jackson might be exactly what I need.
Also, Gary Oldman and Michael Keaton.
Oh, I'm sold.
Yeah,
I'm sold.
Gary Oldman goes for Academy Award winning. Gary Oldman goes for fucking broke.
And Academy Award winning Michael Keaton.
Yeah. No, I wish he won for Birdman. He didn't win because did you ever see because I forgot who won because he was the guy that everyone was like he's gonna win, and then he didn't.
That's right.
And then Stallone didn't win for supporting for Creed, and I just fucking crumbled. Those are my 2 childhood acting heroes.
Holy shit.
All we need is Harrison Ford to be up for one and lose, and I would just be disintegrate. Because those are that's like the holy trinity for me as a kid. It was like Keaton, Harrison Ford, and Stallone. And 2 of those guys in recent times have been so fucking close.
Publicly humiliated.
Oh my God.
Wow. Okay. So I do have that to look forward to in the reboot. And then maybe if you guys are good, we might go past all this.
Yeah, that's true. We're not sold on going into all the other stuff. We'll see. But we at least want to get the movies in there for you because I feel like people have seen those, people know those. The TV series, comics, and cartoons. While there's some great comics out there, I bought the animated series and watched it. Not all of it, but fucking insane. And then Amazon Prime has the TV show, The Prime Directives, to watch, and oh my god, yeah, I haven't finished those, so we'll see. We'll play it all by ear, but yeah, so that's it, kids. Citizens of Old Detroit and Delta City, this has been another episode of Murphy's Jaw, the greatest Death Wish podcast on the planet.
God's favorite podcast.
I'm Jake.
I'm Mike.
And remember, kids, stay out of trouble.
This has been another Geek Out production. If you enjoyed what you heard, hey, we've got a special episode every Friday. Of course, there's the usual catching up show every Wednesday. And you get book club episodes just about every Tuesday these days. Thanks for listening.